Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco, Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I am here to review the final episode of Love and Death. And this episode is called Shh. And it's a great title. I mean, the titles for this season were good. You know, a lot of TV shows nowadays, they are struggling to come up with titles that are relevant to the episodes, or they come up with titles and they're kind of pretentious, like especially X-Files. They'd have all these like random words and it would be like, what the fuck does that mean? And then you look it up and it's like, oh, that's the Spanish word for disruption or something like it. A lot of TV shows have problems with titles, so I really do appreciate that, you know, they came up with good titles for the episodes. And I know that sounds like a very minuscule thing to praise, but it deserves it, trust me. I mean, we've seen a lot of bad titles. Better Call Saul. In particular, I would say Fun and Games. What a terrible title. Oh, God. Anyways, this episode, it's tough because I would say that overall, I don't know if it'll work better as a binge or what, because it feels like if you binged this series, you would get a lot more out of it as a whole. Like, you would get a lot of each actor, you get a lot of like specific storylines that, you know, some of them don't even get resolved, so, you know, you have to take what you can get from early on, and, well, they don't get resolved in real life, that's what I mean. And so, I really think that this finale is mixed, but it is good. Like, it was a good episode. It was very refreshing after yesterday, where I suffered through time after time, that today I watched this good episode of television. It was very nice. I was really thankful that, you know, somebody could actually make something good. That's how bad time after time was. I'm not kidding. It almost made me want to just not even watch anything ever again. That was how bad it was. I was like, oh, I'm going to have to go back in time and not watch that movie so that it prevents me from being so disappointed. And as I said, this finale had the perfect build-up. Like, last episode was an A+. I mean, it was the perfect 1, 2, 3 build-up. You know, what's going to happen, all these questions. And then the very end on the cliffhanger that they end on. The finale has a bunch of payoffs. It is payoff city, which I really liked. You know, I was really worried that they were going to do the modern thing and be like, no, we're not going to pay any of these things off. You know, we're going to kind of make this narrative and not really give you the payoffs that you wanted. And they gave me everything I wanted, basically. I mean, there's only so much they can do when the story in real life ends in such an unsatisfying way. You know, that's where the real life story finally gets kind of bad. The way that things turn out, I felt like based off of this show, it didn't feel like, the biggest problem, it didn't feel like the stuff that happened in real life was the stuff that would have happened in season 2 if they made a season 2 of this show. You know, it didn't feel like any of the outcomes that they said at the very end matched up with this finale. And to me, there's one of two options. Number one, they wanted you to think like, well, it doesn't seem like that now, but everything seeps in over time and things get really dark and they don't even realize that this event is going to affect them forever. Or number two, it's because the show did a poor job at portraying things as they really were, and so you were kind of misled to believe all these things about certain people and how certain things would end up. I'm not sure, because I don't know. I trust the people who made the show. I mean, they did a really good job. I would definitely want to pay attention to other things that they make, and so I'm not going to just jump to that conclusion. But before we get to the ending, which is probably the worst part because of the real life stuff, let's talk about all the payoffs. Let's talk about the rest of the finale. So first off, it opens up with Candy's testimony. And I gotta say, like, it didn't seem like her testimony was too exciting. You know, they could have gone this easy way of just giving her all these inflammatory things to say. But instead of that, what I really liked was that they knew that this testimony was really uninteresting because she was drugged up and she was like a zombie. And she was really, really not on her A game. Which, by the way, Elizabeth Olsen did a really good job overall in this series. I mean, she really, everything she's in, she pretty much gives an A+ performance. So she's also someone who you probably want to pay attention to her next projects. And her testimony, it was not interesting. And so instead, they took the murder, and you got to see basically the full murder play out on screen. And they knew that you'd like that. So, not that you'd like the murdering happening, but that you would find it exciting. And so they interspliced those, and they made that testimony interesting. And they really fixed that. I think that was a good choice, because without it, it would have honestly felt like a disappointment. After last episode's build-up, all this build-up, she's not ready, tick-tock, tick-tock, she looks like a zombie. Like, that was an incredible build-up. And then you get this boring testimony where she's just like, 1, 2, 3, 4. That wouldn't have worked. So to cut in the real murder happening in between the stuff that she's saying was a great choice. I think that was one of the better choices of the finale. So that was payoff number 1. But then what happened was that the defense attorney, Mr. Iron Fist, he was really concerned still, and he didn't know what to do, and so he had this great quote where he said, oh wait, well, this will happen when he's doing a certain thing, so I guess I should talk about this other testimony first. They also brought in the psychologist, I can't remember which one he was, the one who doesn't give drugs. He came in and he talked about the whole incident, and he finally revealed to us the incident that happened as a kid where she broke a glass jar and a piece of glass hit her in the head, and she was crying, and her mom shushed her, and that was the moment that created this dissociative identity problem. I honestly didn't think I would have any doubt after that other episode, but throughout this episode, I had a little bit of doubt, like in terms of the way that it sounded and the way that he made it sound. Just it felt like there was something more there. And they brought up the sunglasses lens and how it was in the garage, even though she never went to the garage, apparently, and how it got there is basically unexplained. So that was another kind of big, this is weird. And then the fact that, there's a crying baby, or there's a baby in general, she knows it, and then she takes a shower to get all the blood off and then leave. I wish that they had shown that, though, when she actually did the crime, because it didn't really work as well cutting that into the trial scenes for some reason. But yeah, the psychologist or psychiatrist, he finally revealed that incident, and I was glad that he did, because I was unsure of what was going on. It was very brief, So that was another payoff. So you have two huge payoffs that they gave you. And that was great because that's what finales are supposed to do. Traditionally, when writers write the episodes and not hacks who write shows like Better Call Saul, you're supposed to have payoffs. You're supposed to feel satisfied with what they give you and not feel like you want to punch the television until your fist is bleeding with glass breaking all over it. And so then he realizes he's going to have to make Betty look unsympathetic, which was very easy to do because she had this history of people thinking she's a handful and thinking like, she's got her moments like everyone where she is not very nice and there are moments that just stick out. And so it's not the fact that like she's a bad person, it's the fact that if she has a little bit of that tendency to flip out or be mean to people or whatever, that it would play into that situation, and it could lead the jury to doubt. It's called doubt, reasonable doubt, that Candy just murdered her for no reason. It's stupid. So I was like, that's fine. I mean, that's kind of the bad part of every defense attorney has to do stuff like that, and they always have to paint the victims as if they're bad or there's some way that, they did that. And the line that the lawyer, Mr. Iron Fist, says is, "It's Texas, people will forgive murder, but adultery not so much." And I thought that was a really funny and accurate line. And that's true, unfortunately. That's very, very true. That was probably the best quote of the episode. So he's got to rip into Betty. And it didn't... I thought that was another big flaw, was that it didn't feel like that whole sequence was very negative, as they wanted to make it out to be at the end, clearly. So that was kind of ineffective. They showed the young preacher, the young minister, and he was like, "She was mean to me. She was very rude. At least Candy was cordial." And it's really funny, the way he talks and everything that he said, like, he's just this little shrimpy piece of crap, and he's just like totally like destroying Betty for no reason, because he's mad that she found his sermons boring, essentially. The problem is that apparently other people at the church talked bad about her, and they didn't really show that. And I felt like they really should have showed some more of that to kind of show like how bad it was that what they were doing in that part of the trial. I mean, they had to do it, but still, it's a negative thing, and obviously it has further implications. And let's see, what else was... Oh yeah, and there was a great back and forth between Mr. Iron Fist and the judge. And I felt like the judge was also great, and it was great to see them interact, and for the little amount that we got to see them go back and forth. And in particular, he put Mr. Iron Fist in jail, and then he took him out. And that was kind of funny as well, so that was another payoff, I guess. Because originally they said that he was going to spend some jail time after the trial ended, but in this other incident, the judge said, well, for this you're going to be spending time in jail effective as soon as we have recess. And then there was a great moment where he's like, it's getting a little late, and so I'm going to call it recess. And that was clearly like a parallel to last episode when the lawyer was like, it's getting a little late, and Candy needs a break, and so can't we start tomorrow? So I thought that part was good. I don't know if it was like that in real life. Finally, let's just talk about... should we talk about Jesse Plemons? No, I guess not yet. Trust me, there's a little bit to kind of complain about with Jesse Plemons. And then I would like to say that we get introduced to a completely new character, and his name is Mr. Shower Fist. And they show Mr. Iron Fist, and it's basically him transforming and becoming Mr. Shower Fist as he's showering and he getting ready for the closing arguments. And I thought, oh shit, he's gonna finally fist the judge today. It's gonna be pretty intense and scary. And his closing argument was really good. The way that he cited a lot of these things that you saw in the trial. So his closing argument was pretty good. I would say it was definitely the better closing argument. And then the other guy just went up there, and his closing argument was terrible. It was like the most lazy, by the books, like just dull closing argument I've ever heard. And if the jury had found her guilty, then they would have clearly been biased, in my opinion. I mean, his closing argument was so bad that I don't even want to talk about it. Like, it was really bad. Really bad closing argument. And then, of course, what happens is that Candy is found not guilty. And I gotta say, still at the end of the season, I don't know. I'm not gonna just say like, yes, 100%. I would say like, right now, after watching the whole series, I would say that I have about a 70% belief that she did it in self-defense, and like still a 30% belief that she did it on purpose. Because not all murder is premeditated, so, you know, she could have gone there and then decided on killing her in there. Which is, I don't know, the sunglasses thing is really troublesome, honestly. And then the thing with her showering, and by the way, they really had it with the shower symbolism with her showering off the blood. That was symbolic, like earlier on in the season with Jesse and her showering together. And then, of course, the lawyer showering was him showering off the guilt that he had felt from making Betty look bad in court for the case. Which I didn't really get at that time, because the way that they did it, they played a nice inspirational song, and they made it like a rock moment where it's like, yeah, he's suiting up, he's a superhero, he's a badass, he's never tried a criminal case before, and he ripped the prosecution to shreds practically. Like, they really only have one instance where they had some sort of a advantage against her. But apparently it was really not like an oh yeah moment. Like, that was the really surprising thing. That's why at the end of this show, I felt like I was bitch slapped. Like, I just felt like the people who made the show, they're like, oh, you thought you were gonna get a happy ending? Watch out! Sucks to suck, dipshit. Like, that's what it felt like. And then Jesse Plemons, I really felt like a big flaw with this series, if you look at it week by week as a whole, is that he was really the best actor in the show for the first couple episodes. I mean, he's perfect. And then at a certain point, he's really not in the show anymore. He just sits there and, you know, he just has this face. He's just staring at people, and it's just, it's so, like, you can tell that the people who made the show know that he's a great actor, and they just wish that they could give him something to do. like they wish they could go up to him and give him a puzzle to play with or something so that he would do something entertaining on screen. And then they showed that this blonde woman from church, he is already hooking up with her, which is kind of weird. Another kind of weird thing. Weird part of the story. Very, very weird. And there were things like that where it was like, it gave you a really icky and weird feeling. Like, there's more to the story than the people who made the show were able to show you, because the stuff that happened in real life, who knows at this point. And it feels at first like it is a great ending because, maybe she did do it in self-defense, which it's very plausible. I mean, it's very, very plausible. I think that I would if I were a part of the jury, I would have to vote not guilty just because there was doubt in the first place of whether she killed her or not. But I would say that, like, if I had a choice between guilty and not guilty, I probably would have put her as guilty. Like, if you didn't have the reasonable doubt thing, because I don't know, there's just too many loose ends and too many, like, holes that make you go, ugh. Especially afterwards, especially what they reveal at the end, which is basically like a totally antithetical to the entire episode, where it's like this happy, satisfying episode, and it's like she wins, yay, the hero wins. So finally, at the end of the episode, I was really hoping she was going to have one last confrontation, interaction with Jesse Plemons, and she does. And I was really happy that we got that payoff. That's another payoff. So that's multiple huge payoffs that they gave you in this finale. And it's a nice little scene. It's a weird scene, too, because Jesse Plemons just basically acts like nothing really happened. She's kind of like, you can tell she's still in love with him. You can tell that he's kind of still in love with her. So that's where I felt like it was a little bit unsatisfying, was because they didn't really share their true feelings at the end, I think. That's just from the show. That's not from real life. It just, at the end, I felt like they're not being completely honest with each other here. They want to say more than they're saying. And that's kind of unfortunate that, they're not saying what they really want to say. Another thing that was kind of funny was that, Jackie, she is never going to forgive Candy. But at the very end of the show, you had Jessica Jones coming over, and she's just fully on her side. And I will say that Jessica Jones was in the show, and she was one of the only elements that I never talked about until now. Well, now that the show is over, I am going to briefly mention, I will say, she was just like a plain Jane side character. And it is, at some points I kind of questioned like why they had to have all those scenes with her, because I don't know, like with Jackie it was a lot better of a friendship, and so that was kind of, I will say that was kind of like a couple of those scenes felt a little bit like filler scenes. And it was just so funny. She was very, very plain and in the background and very average in the show. And I felt like her scenes, her character, they were probably the weakest element of the show, which I don't think that's Jessica Jones's fault. I just think that in real life, she really wasn't that interesting of a character to have for so much of the show. I mean, she was in a lot of the show and certain scenes and everything, and I guess it's fine, but I just wanted to mention that because I felt like I had to. I had never mentioned it until this moment right now. Now, for the ending, the ending is pretty Debbie Downer-ish. It's very, very much like, oh, oh, oh. First off, let's just get this over with. Candy and Pat divorced. Now, the reason why that was very upsetting and weird was because at the end of this season, it felt like they were a perfect happy family and that they had resolved all their issues in the season. You know, like the whole season was them, you know, the whole point of the story was that they had these problems, they didn't fix them, and then they fixed them and they became a good family again. So it was totally like out of left field. They just put up this caption. They got divorced. The family got torn apart. I was like, what the fuck? See, that's already, it's like, what is going on here? You know, with this season, like, what is going on? How is it that we just watched this season and then in real life it's like, wait a second, that happened? That's not what I expected at all. So they could have done a lot more to show that that was going to happen or something, because I really feel like, though, that the people who made the show, they wanted there to be this very subtle, under the radar feeling that that event, the murder and then the trial, it would affect them forever. And so it wouldn't just end with them winning the trial and everything. It would go on forever. They had like two moments that implied that. They had a moment where the lawyer's secretary, she told him that it was going to eat him up inside forever. And then they had a moment where the husband said that this story would go on forever, and just because the trial was over, that didn't mean anything. But still, there was no hint at all that they would divorce and split apart. So that was very, very upsetting. And then number two, Jesse the man Plemons, he got together with this blonde woman like right after the trial, and then he divorced her, and it's like, what the fuck is up with that? That part was a little understandable, but then they said that Betty's parents, so the parents of the murder victim, adopted Jesse Plemons' children, and they took care of them, and it just felt like, God, this is terrible. And they said he got married a fourth time. Like, ugh, it just sounds like such a dark ending, and such like an ending where it's like, did the right thing really happen at the end? That's the big question. And finally, probably the most upsetting thing, and the thing that was just the biggest out of left field, what the F, was the lawyer, Mr. Iron Fist, Mr. Shower Fist. Mr. Shower Fist ran for governor. I guess he lost. I would have voted for him. It was 1986, though, so I wasn't even born yet. Oh, well, speaking of, he actually killed himself by shooting himself in the head, I guess, the year I was born, 1998. So, yeah, like, he killed himself. Who knows why? Like, why the hell did he do that? Like, it was so out of left field. It was so unexpected. And I think probably the biggest telling thing about this episode is the fact that I had a stronger reaction to the ending with these captions about real life than I did about the stuff that actually happened in the episode. And so I would say that was kind of telling, was that maybe they didn't want to have like a really dark and depressing episode because they could have. I mean, it just feels like everyone must have been a lot more affected by this than we actually saw on screen. Because, I mean, why did he kill himself? Why? Because he did his job at the trial and he had a couple of people just say their honest opinion about the murder victim. I mean, that it just seems kind of a stretch. And I would say that was the biggest flaw. Like, overall, this was a good show. It was a good true crime story. It was a satisfying story, I guess, but I gotta be honest. I would never watch this show again, because the stuff at the end in real life, it's too dark, it's too unsatisfying, it leaves you with like an empty feeling. Like, oh, the right thing really did not happen here in this situation. And I just feel like the way that they painted it the whole season, it was like the opposite. It was like, oh, this really horrible thing happened, but the right thing happened in the end. And then they're like, no. That's what I have to say. And in terms of food, I had said earlier that I thought that this season was like KFC coleslaw. I would amend that. I would say it is like KFC coleslaw, a fried breast and a drumstick, mashed potatoes and gravy. It is the full meal. But then afterwards, you have food poisoning, you get sick to your stomach, you throw up, you have diarrhea, you've got diarrhea coming out of your nose, you've got puke coming out of your you-know-what. It's just like a monstrous situation that is probably could never happen in real life. That's what this show is, because it just felt like so weird at the end, where after you've watched this full story that they painted for you, that you find out what happened in real life. It was totally out of left field, and it was totally weird. It was a weird feeling. It was like, okay, that's unsatisfying. And I would say too that I would give the finale a B+. I would definitely say that it was a step down, because they probably knew, all the stuff happened in real life that was so unsatisfying. So we're just going to have to do as best we can as painting this as like a victory, and painting this as like a positive episode and ending, when really, I would say that if I would have made the series, that I would have probably, I don't know, it just, when you don't know all the real information and you don't know all these things, it's also really hard to fill in the gaps and paint a full picture. So I understand why they had issues. But I probably would have painted it in a much darker way from the beginning. Because at the beginning, I really felt like it was dark. And then as soon as the murder happened, it almost felt like the show was going to get really light and positive, with her getting, quote-unquote, the help she needed with that lawyer. And I really liked the lawyer character, because it was so cool how he never tried a criminal case before, and then he scores this major victory against all odds. Just what an inspirational character. But unfortunately, how it ends up with everything, very, very depressing. I'm glad that Safi didn't watch it, because she would have been like, "Ah, that's depressing. Ah," she would have been like, "I give that episode a D. D for depressing. Marco, what do you give it?" That's what she would have said. Just so you guys know, in case you were missing Safi in these Love and Death reviews, that's what she would have done. "Oh, I don't like that. That's depressing. I never want to watch that again. I want to go watch CNN instead." Anyway, anyways, if you guys, the one thing that I would really like to do, and I don't know if I should do it or shouldn't, it's one of those video ideas where I'm almost aching to do it. I would really like to do a top 10 true crimes that should be made into movies or limited series video. And I don't know if it would be too disrespectful or what, but I just feel like I want to make that video because I feel like there are true crimes that, they deserve some attention in terms of movie and television show adaptations. And yeah. And then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see more honest videos like this. And yeah, goodbye everybody. See you soon.